a terrible picture, an analogy, Bob, a volcano, but volcanoes aren't all bad if you think about it, right? They release a lot of pressure. If it wasn't for volcanoes, we'd have massive earthquakes. I mean, so volcanoes are beautiful in some ways, right? But they also are very dangerous. But they are a natural occurrence in this world. And workforce development in 2020 is a strange beast. I started thinking back when I started thinking about where do I want to begin, it's always really good to begin at the beginning, right? And so I started thinking back to November of 2019. And remember these days, right? This is what the airports look like. This is actually meeting of the minds, Michael Carl, the magician. Where we're working, we were going to conferences. We had these great venues filled with people for not only music and entertainment, but sporting events as well. And then we would get together for family and friends and gatherings, things that we take for granted. And look, right, we were just humming along. The unemployment rate was at an all-time record in the state of California. Our California payroll was nearing all-time high at 17 million, right? And if you look over at the chart, California Industries payroll jobs, year over year from 2018 to late last year in 2019, we had experienced growth in every single sector of our state, except for other services, right? Which are just kind of a sundry and miscellaneous types of jobs. But in every other key industry sector, we were humming along. And even Imperial County was experiencing a really moderate unemployment rate. Although for Imperial County, we know that that's relative if you compare across the state. And workforce stakeholders, well, we were really busy. Back in late last year, we were doing things like developing apprenticeship models, right? And we were talking about how we can link high school CTE programs through dual credit reciprocal agreements into post-secondary education, maybe to develop youth apprenticeship programming. We were talking about other earn and learn models and the use of those, particularly to link the hardest to serve. We were working on high road pathways. Every region and every community had sectors. In Imperial, I'm sure it was manufacturing and trade and logistics, right? As example, healthcare, key sectors in your region. We were serving targeted populations, prison to employment. I know that that's an example of how we were working, a special grant funded by the state of California. And the Southern Border region, received a $150,000 grant. You guys have 2 state prisons in Imperial County. We were focusing on the hardest to serve. Excuse me. We were implementing regional plans across counties and labor markets. You guys are in a region with the Southern Border when it comes to workforce development, San Diego and Imperial counties. We could talk about whether that makes sense or not later. So that's not the focus of this presentation, but you guys are working on that. And then, of course, there was a lot of funding around Senate Bill SB1, which was construction projects and infrastructure work. And then lastly, thanks to Assemblymember Garcia, we worked very closely to fund AB 1111. And that's really about linking the CBO community to the workforce development system to break down silos. And I know that ROP is working on a project now funded through that grant. So we were busy, and a lot of it was focused on the hardest to serve, and rightly so. The economy was humming along, right? But then COVID came, March 11th, 2020, and excuse me for a second, let me just take a drink. And you're gonna ask me about that date, March 11th, because that date doesn't pertain to anything really. Except it's the last date that I was in the capital of California. It was our day at the Capitol for the California Workforce Association. And we had about 65 people. We actually had about a reception with about maybe 30% of our attendees. It was all scaled back. And everything just shut down right after that. But look at this chart, right? And you guys have all seen the charts. I mean, this is the unemployment insurance claims in weeks leading up to April 4th, 2020. Bam, never seen anything like it in the state of California, in the nation. It's historic, right? Look at this. I mean, this is the weirdest thing about this to me, is the charts have just been extraordinary, right? And so you think about, look, total private employment bottoms out. State government drops significantly. Local government, bam, drops significantly, right? And federal government drops as well. And so you start seeing these huge cliffs. And then I always go back to what was happening in 2009, 2010. Do you remember that? That's a huge recession, right? And there was the stimulus programs. The government was funded well, right? So this is from UC Berkeley Labor Center. And it just shows you we were hit with this huge pandemic of likes we've never seen in workforce development. And I've been around the block once or twice. And I've seen a lot, Hurricane Katrina, I see 9/11, I seen the huge earthquakes in California, Loma Prieta. Never seen anything like this. Look at the numbers, these compare, right? California unemployment rate, 11% last month. And that's after coming back from almost 16%. California payroll jobs have come back to just under 16 million, but nowhere near where they were. And then look at the year over year change. Comparatively, every single key industry sector completely hammered. It doesn't paint a really good picture for workforce development, let alone economic development or for our communities, correct? And what about Imperial Valley? I'm not here to focus necessarily, but as Edwin said, I care deeply about workforce development. I got in this business because I know the value of work and how important it is for us as humans and for us as Californians. And if you can look at the trend line here for Imperial, I mean, you guys were doing relatively pretty well. You had a strong kind of valley going for a number of years and then back up quite high in April. I think it was around 27%. I couldn't really tell. And then, of course, we all know the story about COVID and Imperial. Unfortunately, Imperial has become known as one of the hardest hit counties in the country on cases of COVID, right? This all links to our second pandemic. It happened May 25th, 2020. The murder of George Floyd, right? And author James Baldwin said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. And I think for me and for many hundreds of thousands of Americans, this was an eye-opener. For many millions of Americans, it wasn't an eye-opener. It's just something that people live with every day. And we begin to look back at these flashpoints that we have now on the new racial justice movement. And really, this has become the second pandemic, in my opinion, race inequity. We have it occurring everywhere. The removal of monuments, nationwide celebrations and calls to make Juneteenth a holiday, right? The DACA decision by the Supreme Court, legislation that was proposed by Assemblywoman Weber, which bars government institutions from considering race, gender, and ethnicity in employment. This allows that to be overturned, right? We do know that it's taken until June 15th of this year for gay and transgender workplace protections to be fully extended. So this country, while we feel like we have a lot of freedom, and we absolutely do, and we feel like we've made a lot of progress, in many ways, this was a wake-up call to the fact that maybe we haven't done everything we could have done, right? So we're faced with two pandemics, a healthcare public crisis that likes we've never seen before in this earth, and a pandemic around racism. And I could add a third one around climate change. By the way, it's 92 degrees in the East Bay today at October 21st, right? So, but I won't add the third one. And I'll just say, so what does this mean for the state of California, a state that has the largest population of any state of people of color? It has the largest population, I don't need to tell your region, of Hispanics and Latinos, has the 5th largest population of Blacks and African Americans, and Asians, 1/3 of the nation's total, and also the 3rd largest population of Native Americans. So significantly diverse, right? It gets even more diverse for us. Almost half the nation's immigrants live in the 3 states above that's listed: California, Texas, and New York. Nationwide, 700,000 DACA arrivals last year, and California has the most of those DACA arrivals, right? And what of WIOA? When you think of these pandemics and you think of race and equity, I get asked this all the time. What does the workforce system look like? Well, the workforce system is so big. I'm just going to show you what I've looked at recently, and I'm going to get back to this being the beginning. We looked at Title I numbers, and you can see, Black and Hispanics, I added it up here, 65% of the population of adults, 56% in dislocated workers, 78% of our youth programs. That's what the enrollment numbers tell you, but those aren't the real numbers. Again, I started the segment with maybe it's time for us to ask deeper question. And has our system actually done everything it could do to advance the causes, right? The COVID has shown the light on the underbelly of our local, regional, and state economies. Take a look at these industries and look at the job losses from COVID. Many of these job losses likely won't come back 100% or likely even 75%. So the Latino community, Latinx community, is going to take a beating in many of these industries. This is why I say it is a combined of pandemics. And what does this all mean for counties like Imperial? These are just some very flash statistics, folks, that I pulled yesterday. So please, if I didn't get this correct, don't beat me up, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty close. This is from the California Census 2020. 83% Hispanic and Latino in the county of Imperial, right? Look at the industry sectors. So this is 2017, but my guess is it hasn't changed too much. Education was the largest sector, accounting for 23% of the jobs in your county. But that's followed by 3 sectors: retail, agriculture, and public, which is like government. Right? And if you look at the pie chart, the 4th largest one is leisure. My guess is fueled by a lot of the restaurant and hospitality industry in the county. So, you've got 5 industry, 3 of them are low wage industries. If you go back to that chart where a lot of those jobs are not going to come back, it could be challenging. This, coupled with the fact that your salaries are quite low comparatively across the state of California. The average annual salary in 2017, $40,000, while statewide it was $70,000 for a household, right? And lastly, the high school completion rates being way below state average at 68%. Now this, I paint this because I don't want to say it's doom and gloom, but I point these out because it's really important about what comes next. And I want to do a time check. Adriana, do I have 10 minutes left?
How much does?
Anybody know? Please tell me if you can. You can interrupt me, just shout it out. Keep calm, everybody, and develop the workforce, right? These are staggering statistics, terrible numbers I showed you about COVID and about race and ethnicity. Do I have 10 minutes? Do we know yet? I have 8 minutes. Okay. So for workforce development boards, we really have to be thinking about some key areas as we move forward. But it's what we always do when it comes to the workforce system, right? And I'm not just talking about workforce boards, I'm talking about all workforce stakeholders: education, community colleges, ROP, adult education, community-based organizations, employment development department, Department of Rehabilitation. All of you need to think about your regions and communities' social economic challenges and economic opportunities. I have been saying it for decades. That hasn't changed, but here's some specifics right now, right? When an emergency happens like we've had with the pandemic, we've got to stabilize the economy, and you guys have been working on that like all other communities. That's getting people their unemployment insurance, support services, and facilitating CARES Act funding. You got to take measure of your local economy now. Where are the jobs that people are getting? There are jobs that are being filled today, and they may be lifeboat jobs. Those are jobs that people just need because they're not collecting any other support, right? Once you find those jobs, then you've got to explore the permanent shifts and the types of skills that are embedded in those lifeboat jobs as you build out your skills, right? You got to think about your small business and economic growth and how you support and stabilize that part of your segment of your society. Where does your community need to be shored up? Are there other aspects like transportation or homelessness, right? What are your return to work strategies so that people feel safe coming back to work? And lastly, use your job creation strategies that you have already built in. Things like work experience, on-the-job training, entrepreneurship. Those are quick ways to create jobs. And in terms of race and equity, you know, CWA really thought, another time check, 5 more minutes. CWA really thought long and hard about this. And we kind of stepped back and we said, you know, we're probably as guilty. I would say we are as guilty as anybody else in our silence in looking and exploring these issues. And the board of directors, and Priscilla's on our board, and I'm very proud. I mean, they stood in solidarity and said that we're going to turn up the volume on race and equity issues. We're going to work with our colleagues and partners across the country and the state to hold governments accountable, to represent your voices. And we're going to recognize our platform and privilege as best we can, right? And so CWA quickly convened about 16 individuals from across the state, and it's a growing group of people. Started out as 3 or 4 people, and we said we need to start first by looking at ourselves, the Title I system, and CWA as an organization. And we came up with these key areas. There are 5 of them. First, research and analysis. Like anything else I mentioned earlier in the presentation, you have to measure, take measure, right? So we need to analyze the data. You just saw a very small glimpse of the Title I data when it comes to the demographics, right? But we need to take a look and do a deep dive at what that data tells us, not only across the state, but by regions and communities. We need to identify industries where Black and brown people are both underrepresented and overrepresented, and ensure that we're building pathways out of low-wage jobs. Peer-to-peer by sharing information between local governments and local workforce boards, because some workforce boards are further along than this on this topic than others. City of Oakland, City of Los Angeles have been working on these issues for 3 or 4 years now. And there's a lot to learn about how workforce boards can be intentional about their investments around race and equity. And we also are going to do some training, follow that up with changes to CWA and in some of our training. One of the training that's going to be coming up is implicit bias training. Take a look at that. And then lastly, and this is a big one, and I'm going to hover, and I think I've got just a couple more minutes left. Work with all of you, state and local partners, so that we ensure that the state board and the labor agency holds fast on equity, and that they have policies in place that advance equity for all. And really, it's our job, and I don't mean this with any due disrespect, but it's our job that represent local systems to question regularly whether or not the investments are appropriate and have the intended outcomes. And so we plan on doing that to the state and to the federal government. And there's a lot to do in Imperial County, just some ideas for you. Digital literacies are going to be a big challenge for folks coming back to work, right? Because a lot of folks are going to be working remotely. So how are you going to deal with the digital literacy issues for everybody? How about digital access? And remember, it has to be equitable, which does not mean equal, right? You just can't take 100 grand and split it in fours and to divide it in 4 areas of the county. You've got to really take a look at where the need is and where there's need and split the money equitably. And if you want to know a definition, ask me later between equitable and equitable and equal. You have to link strategies. So your job creation strategies that we mentioned around work experience, on the job training, link that to skill building, and then link that back to your economic development efforts. Of course, support for schools is key. CTE in regions like Imperial County that has the demographics that you have is everything. Invest in your CTE programs and make sure those programs are part of those strategies that are being linked in the bullet point above. Look at your data, make sure you start the conversation and be intentional about serving not only Black and brown communities of job seekers, but businesses.
Hi, Bob, this is Juan. Can we get a couple of minutes here just for Q&A? Thank you so much.
I am about done. This is my last slide. Q&A time, it's all yours, Juan.
All right, any questions?
I'm gonna turn the screen back over to you. I'm gonna leave it on this slide while we talk.
Okay, so we got Adriana saying we have a time for maybe 2 minutes for a couple of questions. So any questions from the audience?
Yes, this is Esperanza Colio with the County of Imperial. I'm a deputy CEO for the County of Imperial. And I have the following questions. You touched something very important, which is going back to work, to regular business after COVID-19. What do you think companies and organizations will have to do in order to bring back those who are working from home, some of them? And what kind of, how do I say it, technicalities or resources they need to have available for those coming back to work? Because as you may know, some of them have been at home, working from home for the last 6 months. And the work from home is a little bit different because it's a more relaxed environment. And I can foresee them struggling at the beginning, going back to the normal time to work, the traveling, dropping the kids at school, all those things that we were used to it. And now we're going to have to accommodate ourselves. So my question to you is, has anyone has an analysis of how this is going to create an impact on those that are working from home? And then the other portion too is the following. So when you have couples working together, bringing income to the same household, but then realizing, you know what, my hours were reduced, but we were able to accommodate. And I realized I am better serving my kids at home by working with them at school. My guess, and this is just my guess, is that some of them may decide not to go back to the workforce and rather stay home because it's more, be more successful in raising their kids, and they see the benefit. They will struggle a little bit with the income, I will say that, but then on the other hand, they will be more pleased to be able to help their students at home after this experience. What do you think about those things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, those are very good questions. And I think they are tied together because, this coming back to the workplace is going to affect how our economy recovers, right? We're already hearing that employers are having difficulty bringing back workers for a lot of different reasons. And some of those you mentioned, right? And so the workforce coming back is going to look different, and the skills that they have or who gets called back will be different as well. Now, in terms of the impact on, the safe work environment, yes, there's going to need to be a lot in place. And I know OSHA is working with the state of California right now, and soon we'll be releasing some support for small businesses on how they can make their workplaces feel safe. But it is going to affect workers, and it will affect how many people they can bring back. So we got to watch these shifts.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your question, Ms. Colio, and Bob for your presentation. We hope that you will be able to stay to answer a couple more questions for our after session. So
yes, I'm gonna try.
Awesome, thank you. Without further ado, we have Mrs. Priscilla Lopez from Imperial County Workforce Development Office presenting.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for that, Bob. That's just great insight for what we're doing across the state in the workforce. Locally, as you all know, we do have challenges across the board as far as our workforce is concerned, the unemployment more than anything. So we do have, at any given point in the year, the highest unemployment rate. We usually fight with Yuma or Colusa County for that one, but we do, and it's because of our location, it's because of our industry sectors, and one of, like Bob pointed out, one of our strong industry sectors is agriculture. But we do want to point out that our local industry, our strongest industry is the public sector. So we're looking at education, we're looking at the public sector, we're looking at jobs that are related in government more than anything in education. So that's a good thing to keep in mind when people are talking about graduating from high school and kind of choosing a career pathway if it's something that we want to look at. Locally here at the workforce, we really focus on the industries where we can provide training that's going to be beneficial for our local community. So we've partnered with our local providers. IVROP is one of them. And we have a great youth program that works with youth in school and out of school youth to kind of mentor you along the way and look at all your career pathways and find out what it is that you kind of want to go into in the future and assist you with barriers and challenges that you have currently. We also have lots of trainings that are for technical training that goes into the trades. For example, and I know the state and nationally, we've been looking a lot at in internships and apprenticeships or something that was a big push. And we have one with our electrical workers union, the IBEW, and we assist people going into this program in paying for their fees. So we have supportive services across the board for books and for supplies and things that they might need to complete successfully this program. And it's been very successful. And we know that this is a career that is lucrative and it's sustainable and it's long-term. So it's a positive on all accounts. There are also lots of career trainings that we are involved in with certified nurses assistant. There is career pathways that we can help you investigate and see if maybe you're not so sure where you want to go, but we can help you research that and see where it is that you want. If you're trying to go into a different career, that's something that we can help you with. Locally, we're always looking for opportunities to assist the community into getting into a sustainable economy and being able to sustain themselves economically. And I'm going to put in the chat
Priscilla, we lost your audio.
Oh, okay. I don't know what happened there, sorry, but in the chat I put the Ivy Workforce website, so you can access that and see all our job sites. We have 3 co-located job centers, one in El Centro and one in Brawley and one in Calexico, and 3 satellite sites, one in Calapat, one in Winter Haven, and then a new one here in El Centro on 4th Street. Our satellite sites and computer banks are closed to the public because of COVID mitigation. However, they are open via appointment only if you want to come in to register for services to see what we have available, or if you need assistance for job search or just to find out kind of where you want to go. We've seen locally our unemployment rate hit at the highest point in April, 28.1, I believe it was. I was very worried it was going to hit 30–40%, to be honest with you. So when it hit 28.1, I remember looking at it and going, okay, this is survivable. This is something we can come back from. You know, and September 2020 for this year, we're at 21.5. It's down from 22. So we're on our way back up. We're getting people back into the offices. We're having a plan to get people back into work safely. You know, also locally, we have a small layoff aversion grant for small businesses to be able to purchase PPE, because you see businesses and locations that have been closed or wanting to reopen, yet they don't have the capital to purchase the PPE that they need for their workers. Or maybe they want to open and they want to be able to have everybody work on a skeleton schedule or be able to work remotely. We can assist with all of those endeavors. So I do want to, I know I don't have a lot of time, but I did want to make sure that you had our website and that you had just a general information of what we do and what we can assist. But I'm open, you know, a couple minutes for questions. If you'd like to ask me any questions, I'm open. I think we have some time.
Thank you, Ms. Lopez. We have time for one question. Does anybody have any questions for Mrs. Lopez? Okay, if not, we'll go ahead and move on. And Ms. Lopez, will you be joining us for the after session Q&A?
Yes, I'll stick around.
Okay, awesome. So if you don't have any questions right now, be thinking of some and write them down so you don't forget for the end. Thank you. So now we'll go ahead and ask Mr. Oberfeld to present our next keynote speaker, Mr. Stephen DeWitt.
Absolutely. And before I move on, I again want to thank both Bob Lanter and Priscilla in not only your willingness to and your interest in being and working with us today, but also in these times where we're working through Zoom formats and other technology and things don't quite go the way we would like them to do. We jumped in and moved ahead, and we moved ahead with the agenda. But certainly, I appreciate and respect the expertise that I heard from both statewide, from Bob, and then certainly from the county, from Priscilla's perspective. I didn't do a good job of introducing Priscilla at all when we changed, but when we made that shift. But certainly Priscilla and her background in economic and workforce development, as her title implies, she is the Director for Workforce and Economic Development. So she brings a lot of expertise. And I know her, and I know she's very passionate about the work that she does. And she's very much interested, like Bob, in making this a better community. So thank you both, Bob and Priscilla, for that. Bringing it back, I'm very pleased to not only have seen the two presenters that we just saw, but also to see Mr. Stephen DeWitt join us today. Mr. Stephen DeWitt is Deputy Executive Director from the Association for Career and Technical Education, also known as ACTE. His role includes developing strategic partnerships to advance the association's mission and oversight of policy development, as well as advocacy, media relationships, and research activities. A primary focus of ACTE has been to promote career and technical education, value related to school improvement, and student career readiness. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. DeWitt. Thank you so much, Mr. DeWitt, for joining us today and sharing your expertise.
No, it's my pleasure, Edwin. Thank you for that kind introduction. I want to pull up some slides. I know you're probably trying to get through your schedule, so let me do that. Share screen. And you let me know if you can see those.
Yes, we can see the slides.
Okay, great. So thanks for the opportunity. I think there was one who heard me present recently to the California Department of Education, some of the teachers they were presenting to in CTE, and I thought it might be helpful for you just to get a real quick snapshot of who we are and what we do. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We've been around for about 100 years, and we represent the career and technical educators, administrators, anyone who's really a practitioner who's delivering that programming. We straddle secondary and post-secondary education. So we've got folks in membership who are in comprehensive high schools, who are in career academies at the secondary level, an area career tech school, and then at the post-secondary level, community and technical colleges. So really anyone who has to do with CTE who's delivering programming. I put our strategic plan up here, and I wanted to reference just a few items on it. One is advocacy and awareness. We do quite a bit at the federal level, promoting career and technical education before Congress and the administration, the whole 9 yards, as any lobbying office would do, an advocacy office. So we, over the last few years, have been very active in working with the Perkins Act, and I want to talk about that in just a moment. We're also looking right now at innovative programs, and many of those are related to the strategic partnerships, which involve business and industry. A critical aspect of programming at CTE has to be that connection to industry partners. And I'm sure you have good, strong ties, because I was pleased to hear the conversation earlier about CTE. And then our content priorities are on the right side there. Just some of the areas that we're focused on. One of those is the teacher educator pipeline, because our own industry of teaching is affected by many of the people who are retiring in the baby boomer generation. And we're actually seeing a lot of people who are retiring earlier now because of COVID. I've heard 3 stories this week of individuals who are quitting, some at the end of the year and some right away. So that's a real challenge for us. So just a reminder, please thank a teacher, thank an educator. I use the sable palm. I grew up in Florida, and I know you have palm trees in California, and they bend to about 145-mile-an-hour winds in hurricanes. And so I think that's what a lot of our educators are feeling right now, as they're really transitioning everything that they do. And I know that's happening in industry as well. I don't want to minimize that, but we're hearing a lot about that. We produce a lot of resources and supports for our membership. One on the left here, the high quality COVID guide we produced within about 2 weeks after COVID broke. It came out in May actually, but we produced it in 3 weeks. Oh, can you hear me? Sorry, there's a little chatter. I thought that was a question for me. But the reason I wanted to point this out is we've developed an evidence-based, high-quality framework where we've looked at the elements of effective programs in CTE, and we have 13 elements that are included there. So it's things like work-based learning, business and community partnerships, access and equity, and 13 of those where all programs we believe need to be looking at those elements and need to be, we've got an assessment where they can identify where they may have weaknesses and where they can improve. And so a lot of our activities these days are around those elements and providing more resources. The middle really is a quick mention. We have put together a virtual conference planning guide because so many of our folks do conferences. And then on the right side, we actually partner with the state of California on some of the distance teaching lesson plans that they had put together. They put together a newsletter that was going out every week and now every month, and we're contributing to that newsletter with some of the other partners in California. The reason I mention that is we are desperately looking for ways to replace the hands-on learning that takes place in career and technical education. And you can certainly have simulations that mimic that, but there's no replacement really for some of the work-based learning that takes place. And many of our educators are looking for that. So we're struggling to find those best practices when I mentioned innovations earlier. So if you know of any in your community in Imperial Valley, we'd love to hear of those that are working. You know, it also goes to other issues such as certifications. Many of our seniors in career tech courses who were trying to get those industry certifications near the end of the school year were not able to do those. And so there's a lot of issues that have impacted career tech ed related to COVID. Also heard the mention of the equity and diversity issues, and we're certainly focusing on that. We've got a list of issues, but I wanted to mention we have a new mentor program where we're trying to get more conversations about what a classroom needs to look like and what supports teachers need in place. So it's really mentor to mentee talking about these issues, some which are new to our field, and we're trying to do more there. But I really want to talk just quickly and more in depth about our policy work on Perkins. The Perkins Act, which is the main source of funding for CTE programs around the country, was just reauthorized about a year ago. And states, actually it's probably been 2 years now, states have developed their state plans, and now locals are beginning the implementation this year of those comprehensive local needs assessments. And more than ever, this law, I think, is focused on business and industry and how to bring those industry partners to the table. Our association believes strongly that you need to be involved in discussions about curriculum. You need to be involved in discussions about how do we transition students into the workplace. Those industry partners are critical. And we know that not all of our programs have them around the country. So if any of your schools in the area are looking for more resources, we'd love to be able to help with that. I mentioned the framework earlier, the Perkins guide. Many of our state CTE directors around the country are using that framework. So there's I think, lots of avenues where we could support and have conversations with you. I also wanted to mention our Coalition for Workforce Development through CTE. ACTE began this about 2 or 3 years ago, and we've got about 50 plus industry trade associations who are involved now. And the focus on this coalition is really to identify better ways for our industries and educators to work together to ensure that there are smooth transitions for students, to ensure that programming reflects the needs of business and industry. And so we're in the process of developing a scope of work around that. We were fortunate to get a Bill and Melinda Gates funding grant for this to hire someone to coordinate, and we'd be happy to share more about that information. And then on the right side, we've also begun to develop more of a work-based learning, I guess more supports for work-based learning for our field as well, which includes convening them once a year. We also hired a consultant here from Iowa who had been running a work-based learning conference for those individuals in the state of Iowa who were focused on that programming. She's now brought that full scale to a national event. We had about 500 that we had online a few months ago, right when COVID hit. And there's lots of interest in the community now about how do we form those strong work-based learning partnerships with business and industry. We also have some other resources that's represented by that blue block there. And then finally, I just want to invite you, if any of you are interested in our virtual vision event, which brings about, normally we have about 5,000 career and technical professionals, industry leaders together each year. Unfortunately, like many of you, we were forced to change to a virtual event. And we do have around 300 plus sessions, breakout sessions for important professional development that our field needs. It's a terrific time for us, and we hope to go back to that in-person event next year, but you're all welcome to do that. I want to stop there because I do want to save time if there is for Q&A, and feel free to contact me after this event. I'm happy to answer questions. That's my email address and my phone number. And thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. DeWitt. I don't want to put you on the spot, but are you available to stay for the after session?
Absolutely. Yep, I'm planning on it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So I'll go ahead and skip the questions for now, just so that we can stay on schedule. And I will be asking Mr. Obergfell to introduce Mr. Efrain Silva. Edwin, you are muted.
Yes, Efrain Silva, of course, I know him well. But currently he is the mayor for the city of El Centro. He's been on the city council for over 13 years. He's Dean of Economic and Workforce Development for IVC. He has been the Workforce Development Director in Imperial County, and a few years ago, he was the Imperial County Office of Employment and Training Assistant Director. He was even a planner for the city of El Centro. He sits on numerous boards, one of them being the El Centro Regional Medical Center, the Imperial County Workforce Development Board, and one that I'm kind of fond of too, the Imperial Valley Regional Occupational Community Foundation Program. He's been recipient of many awards, the Architect of Change from CWA, and I think one of the most recent, and probably of the many he's received, the Oakley Award, where the Mexican government recognizes outstanding Mexicans that have built a great pathway to help other people of Mexican origin to go out and move and beyond. So a good friend of mine, Efrain Silva, and a good neighbor, Efrain.
Thank you so much, Edwin, for the introduction. And boy, I really feel old now that I hear all that stuff. But it's always my pleasure to join. Those of you that may not know me completely, I've had a relationship with ROP across the board, and for many, many years, I worked for ROP many years ago, running one of the programs. And then when I was on the high school board, I sat on the ROP board as well. And now I sit on the ROP Community Foundation board. So my relationship and my linkages with both Edwin at a personal level and with the organization as a whole go back a long way. And I'm very, very happy to be here with you guys today. I am going to give you what I'm gonna basically call a state of the college as it relates to career education. So I'm gonna give you lots of numbers. We also can talk about where we're going, some of the plans that we have, but I wanna share with you, if I can share my screen, a lot of the numbers that we have and some of the things that we've done here at the college. So sorry, I'm having some difficulties. Okay, so this gives you a complete list of all of the CE courses that we have at the college. Just as maybe as a point of interest, the CE programs are normally divided between two deans under economic and workforce development. I'm in charge of the business, industrial technology areas. Our Dean of Health and Public Safety, Dr. Price, recently left. He got a job in Texas. So while we recruit for the new dean to take over that division, guess who's in charge? Me. So I am in charge of all of these programs, but very happy to do so as well. So when we talk about career education, we're not talking about just the curriculum and the coursework that our students take. Ultimately, many of them will get either a certificate of achievement, which means that they completed the technical side of their program, or an associate degree where they complete the technical side of the program plus all the GE, and it allows them to complete their associate degree. And many of them transfer to a four-year school. But we also are striving to link more and more of our programs to an actual industry certification, so that when our graduates, our completers go out and find a job, they can proudly show their IBC certificate that shows that they came here, they took our coursework, but they can also show that industry certification that really it relates to their job. Employers will immediately know what that means and the skill set that students have. So we're working more and more. I think that we're becoming more and more successful in terms of being able to link our programs with industry certifications. I'm very proud to say as well that because of funding sources that we have, a lot of these industry certifications exams can be rather expensive. And so it becomes an obstacle and a barrier for some of our students to be able to pay $300-400 to be able to take that industry exam. And so through funding that we have, we subsidize, heavily subsidize those exams. And in some cases, we cover the entire cost of the exam. But as you can see, we are, our automotive classes are tied to the American Automotive Service Excellence certifications. Our welding courses are tied to the American Welding Society certifications. Pre-COVID, I'm still very excited about a fast track welding program that we developed, kind of following the private school model where our students come in at 8 o'clock in the morning and they take sequential courses and be here in most cases until about 2 o'clock sequentially, and then they go home or they can go to work. But their schedule is pre-planned so that it allows them to be here when they need to be here, and it allows them to complete their course and their certifications in 11 months in the welding example, as compared to the 2 years that it used to take. So I keep promoting fast track. I think fast track is something that is very desirable by our young people that want to come in, they want to learn a trade, they want to get certified, and they want to go out and work. So we're working more and more to develop more of those fast track programs. Of course, our health programs are certified by the Board of Nursing. One of the exciting things that I'm working on right now is to increase admissions into our nursing program through an investment that we did through a strong workforce. We increased the capacity of our nursing program to increase admissions from 20 a semester to now 30 a semester. And we're working with them to even be able to increase that capacity further. We're also working on creating an evening and weekend LVN, licensed vocational nurse to RN program, and allow those vocational nurses to become RN. And the key to this is make it a weekend and an evening programs. We have a day program, VN to RN, but it doesn't work because most VNs have a job at clinics, at a doctor's office, so they don't have the ability to get out and they do day classes. So I'm very excited about doing an evening and weekend VN to our RN program. Of course, we are fully accredited as a police academy. Our graduates are able to leave our institution, become and be fully recognized and fully licensed police officers and safety personnel, as well as our fire department. So again, we're working more and more and linking all of our classes to industry certifications. And this is only an example of those certifications. So this gives you an idea of our students and where they are in terms of what their level of interest. So you can see that Administration of Justice is a program, our most popular program in terms of numbers. Of course, Administration of Justice, there's many opportunities at the local, state, and federal level for our graduates to go and find jobs. Many of them do transfer for their bachelor's degree. You also can see our awards that we've done over the last 4 years by academic year. Our 16, 17, 586 awards, and the number keeps increasing. We obviously saw a little bit of a downfall in 1920. COVID has affected us in many ways. We continue to do online teaching for the most part, except in the trades where we made some adjustments and we're teaching some of the trades locally, but everything with preventive measures and social distancing and so on and so forth. This also tells you who our students are, and it's a pretty good mix between genders, male and female. Also, a lot of our students are young students. You can see the age breakdown of our students, primarily between the ages of 18 to 24. Lots of freshmen that come here from our local high schools that enroll in career education courses. Almost 60% of them are first-time students, returning students, and so on. You also can see that many of them, the vast majority of them, are full-time students or close to being full-time students based on the number of units that they complete. This tells you where they're coming from. Calexico High School has the highest percentage of our students coming in from the high schools, Central, Southwest, and so on. You also can see that their declared educational goal, almost 40% of them are indicating to us that their goal is to come in, obtain their associate degree, and then transfer to a 4-year school. We, the Chancellor's Office has contracted with Santa Rosa Community College to do an employment outcome survey. So they do this for every college in California. And they have an outreach program where they make sure that they outreach as many of our completers and graduates as they can. And they ask questions about their employment status, their wages, their level of satisfaction, and so on. So I'm very proud of these numbers. As you can see, almost 60, almost 85, now almost 90% of the students that are working 20 hours or 40 hours a week. 67% are working full time. 61% of our completers are working one job. And then the rest, you can see there, some of them may have multiple jobs or some of them are looking for work. But I consider 61% to be a very good number. I will tell you that in comparison to state levels, in most cases, we're right at the state average, and in some cases, we might be a little bit below the state average. But given our own economic conditions and the economic challenges and the level of unemployment, just the fact that we are close to the state average gives me a lot of optimism and satisfaction to know that what we're doing works, what we're doing prepares students to go out and find jobs. And also, as far as their level of satisfaction, if we combine those students that were very satisfied with their training or satisfied, that's over a 90% satisfaction from our students. So I'm also very happy and excited to say that. You can see about 28% of our students were able to find a job right away as soon as they were able to complete. And then you add 42% of the students were able to find a job between 1 and 3 months after completion. You see their earnings increase, and you can see that before training, while they're attending IBC, their average wage was about $15 per hour. And then after training, their wages increased to over $23 an hour. Very, very, very proud of that number because it represents economic development. It represents self-sufficiency for our students, and it's a reflection of the work that we all do. And when I say we, I'm not talking about just me and IBC. I'm talking about all of you that are listening to this, the high school counselors and all the CTE teachers and everyone involved. You can see also that about 45% of our graduates found jobs in a related industry to their study, and another 25% in something that is close to their discipline of study.
Efrain, this is all very interesting. We're just running a little bit late in time, and we don't want to cut into Tina's time. So yeah.
So give me 30 seconds. So Perkins, we use Perkins to fund a lot of the programs. You can't do things without money. So we have a very structured program in Perkins that really analyzes the data and allows us to put money in programs that we recognize that there's a need and there's a return on that investment. We also get $1.3 million close to that in local strong workforce. And we have also a system that allows us to review the applications and put money where an investment is necessary. And we also get another $630,000 from the region on very specific regional projects that also enhances the quality of education for our students. Our Career Services Center is doing an incredible job in terms of preparing our students to go out and find jobs through workshops, through resume writing, mock interviews, and so on. And I'm out of time.
Yes, so if Mr. Silva can stay with us until the end and maybe a couple of minutes after to answer questions.
Of course.
Okay, thank you so much for your presentation and for joining us in the meeting. We'll go ahead and would you like to introduce Ms. Tina No Bartel?
Of course, it's really my pleasure. Tina, where are you? I haven't seen you yet. I'd like to introduce Tina No Bartel, who is the director of the Centers of Excellence for Labor Market Research in the San Diego Imperial County, which is the #1 source of regional labor market information for the California community colleges. Tina provides her expertise for the community colleges, regional marketing, program development, and business engagement efforts. And at a personal level, I want to say that Tina is just an amazing person. She's probably one of the best researchers that I've seen, but her dedication, her work ethics, and her commitment to her job and her commitment to Imperial Valley. Imperial Valley is never far from her mind. And so when she completes reports, she always makes sure that Imperial Valley gets their share and they recognize the uniqueness of our valley. So I'm very happy to introduce Tina No Bartel.
Thanks, Efrain. I really appreciate that intro. I really love the drives out there, and I miss it. So I'm sorry I can't be with you in person. I'm going to share my screen with everybody. And let's get started because I know we're running short on time. So hopefully you can see the actual slides and not the presenter version. Getting some nods. Excellent. So as Efrain mentioned, I run the Center of Excellence for Labor Market Research in the San Diego and Imperial region. What that basically means is that the state of California has dedicated this COE to provide labor market research for programs and help guide the colleges whenever they create any new courses or programs, as Efrain has mentioned earlier. Those were really, really good programs considering the labor market needs of not just Imperial County, but also the region. Some of you may have seen me present on some labor market research before for the Workforce Development Board. I used to work over at the San Diego Workforce Partnership, so I did go out to Imperial County every now and then to share some of our research. So I'm very grateful that you have invited me back. So let's get to it. So as I mentioned, I serve the San Diego Imperial region, and if you're not familiar, IVC, or Imperial Valley College, is one of 10 colleges in the region for San Diego and Imperial. And today I'm going to share with you 2 resources. We have a lot of labor market resources and research, but I really want to focus on 2 reports that we released earlier this year. And I'm hoping that what I provide for you today will kind of give you some aha moments or ideas of how you can incorporate research into your day-to-day work. So my goal is to be able to provide information for not just the community colleges, but for the overall workforce and education system to be able to use data whenever they make decisions. So I hope that I achieve that goal today by sharing with you these 2 reports. So I'm going to go into each of them in a little bit of detail, but not too much. Again, I know we're short on time. But essentially, the first report is a response to a specific scenario that happened earlier this year. So you might have recalled that when COVID hit, everyone panicked and they were terrified about resources, where companies were closing down and so forth. So the community colleges came to me and they had this scenario. They asked, how can we prioritize during COVID due to resource limitations? So right now, because there are so many different programs that they offer, they only have so many programs that they can promote or market, and they wanted to know which jobs were in demand during the pandemic in order for them to focus on those training programs. So we tried to interview and survey employers, and unfortunately at the time when this report was being developed, employers were really reluctant to share which jobs were growing, which jobs were declining, and what kind of training and skills their workers would need in order to transition during the pandemic. So unfortunately, we weren't able to interview employers, but what we did have access to was data on online job postings. So we took a look at data for the certain pandemic period to see which jobs people were still hiring for. I have to include a disclaimer in that online job postings data is very volatile. So we like to look at data that has happened in the past, a lot of historical data, so we can make decisions off of what we've known from the past. But because the pandemic is a very unique situation, we decided to do this report and focus both on not just the history, but also the current situation of our economy. So what we looked at were these 2 periods. One was a Great Recession. So some of the folks here may have remembered that there was a Great Recession. There was a housing market crash, financial crisis, probably the worst recession since the Great Depression. And it happened between 2007 and 2009. And that was the period on paper in which the Great Recession happened. However, because of the severity of that financial crisis, the economic impacts went on until 2010. So for one period of analysis, we looked at which jobs were deemed as recession resilient during that time period. I have to say that recession and the pandemic are not apples to apples comparison of financial crises. They're 2 totally different economic situations. But again, we wanted to provide more context so that colleges can have more information when they make decisions. That's why we looked at the recession period as well. And so any jobs that were in demand during the recession period, we considered as recession resilient jobs. During COVID-19, when we were asked to produce this report, so this happened in March, I was asked to write a report and we had so limited data, so we had to wait a little bit until we can collect that job postings data. So the report focuses on 4 months of the pandemic. So March, April, May, and June. And I'll explain what we looked at, but essentially for jobs that were still in demand during that time, we considered them pandemic resilient jobs. So in the report, you basically have two different lists, recession resilient and pandemic resilient jobs. So let's go down into the details of what that means. So we, the COE, looked at over 800 different occupations. So if you've ever worked with labor market research or seen any labor market reports, we refer to a system called SOC, Standard Occupational Classification System, or SOC codes. And of the 800 plus different types of occupations out there, we found that during the Great Recession, there were only 64 recession resilient jobs based on the criteria that we put together. The criteria were: one, the job had to have labor market demand, meaning employers were still hiring for it during the Great Recession. Two, it also had to pay a living wage. So the report currently focuses on San Diego County, and so we use San Diego County's living wage, but we are producing one for Imperial County. As always, since we serve the whole region, we want to make sure that we always have mirrored reports, one not just for San Diego County, but also Imperial County. And then third, it had to have employment growth at or above the average. So essentially, we just looked at jobs that were in demand and they paid well in San Diego County. And we found that only 64 of those jobs were recession resilient. And in the full report, and I'll share the link to these reports afterward, the full report has an Appendix A, which has data on all those 64 recession resilient jobs. So when you look at that funnel, there are very few resilient jobs during that time. And since I serve the community colleges, we took a look at which jobs the community college market can actually train for. And in the community college world, we call our job market the middle skill market. And so when we looked at those 64 recession resilient jobs, we found that 36 of them were also middle skill jobs, or jobs that were within the community college market. So essentially, you can find that list of community college specific jobs, or jobs that community colleges can train for, on pages 5 and 6 of the report. If you're not familiar with what a middle skill job is, it's in general more than a high school diploma and less than a 4-year degree, based on what employers say they require as education for the job. But there are a few exceptions. So for example, registered nurses is one occupation I always reference, is that it's the exception to this rule because a lot of people in registered nursing positions actually have an associate or less throughout the entire nation. So if you look at everybody employed as registered nurses, over 38% of them, I think it was 33%, excuse me, have an associate degree. So we consider that a middle skill job, even though it didn't meet this criteria of more than a high school diploma and less than a 4-year degree. So again, some exceptions for that middle skill job definition. So we produced this report, and so you'll see that there's a ton of data in it. I'm not going to go into that, again, for the interest of time. But that was the Great Recession. And now, the part that everybody wanted to know about was the pandemic. Which jobs were growing during the pandemic? Well, as I mentioned, job postings data is very volatile. 1 month, an employer will post something because they're freaking out, thinking that they need that job to be filled. And then next month, they realize that a new legislation, a new technology happens, so they post something else. So the numbers jump all over the place. So the COE is always really reluctant to release data on job postings because of that. We can't make clear, accurate analyses based on this volatile nature of the data. So we had to be a little creative in how we looked at it. So what we did was that for each month, we looked at trends. So for the month of March, we looked at what were the top 50 jobs that companies were hiring for. Which ones had the most online job postings? Those top 50 jobs made our list once. Then we repeated that exercise for April. All right, so in April, what were the top 50 jobs with the most online job postings? And then we repeated that for March, April, May, and June. So think of it kind of like the billboards, right? The music billboards list, like what made the top charts. So that's what we looked at in the pandemic months of this period. So to illustrate what it looks like in the report, let's just take a look here. This is alphabetized based on the jobs that made that top 50 list the most during the period. So on the first line, you'll see accountants and auditors, and you'll see that that occupation made the top 50 jobs list in March, in April, in May, and in June. So if you teach accounting or you're an accountant on the side, woohoo, that's apparently a very in-demand job during the pandemic. And I'm very excited to see what happens between July and October. We're gonna rerun the numbers. Again, not just for Imperial County. I've gotten some feedback from some Imperial County folks stating that you're looking at occupations not just within the county, but also throughout the nation. So we'll see if we can incorporate a national view in there as well when we do an update to this report. So just hang tight, but that's the next step for this report. In any case, this is what you'll see is here are some of the top jobs during the pandemic. And as I mentioned, if the job made that top 50s list at least once, then it was included in the report. So later on in this exhibit number 4 of the report, you'll see that those dots or those points kind of staggered out a little bit. And you can kind of tell based on what legislation was going on at the time. So ignore the rest of the table and just look at the bottom row. And in the bottom row, number 60, you'll see that hotel, motel, and resort desk clerks started making that top 50s list in June of 2020. So I can imagine that during that time, maybe there was an announcement that certain businesses were opening and that's why it made the top 50s list. So again, I'm very curious to see what happens over the next few months when we rerun the analysis to see which jobs made the list, dropped off the list, and so forth. So hang tight for that. But again, as I mentioned, this is interesting information, but what do you do with it? Well, you look at the data and then based on the scenario that I shared with you, if you have a program that teaches for any of those occupations on the list, how cool is it to say that you teach for a recession resilient job or that you teach for a pandemic resilient job? So that's how this report could be used. I will also caution that folks are now, again, prioritizing resources. And so I want folks to understand that this is one piece of the puzzle. You cannot only rely on this one report to make very major decisions, such as retiring programs. So I'm going to say this again. This report should not be the only justification used to retire programs. There should be a robust discussion about, okay, do we know that employers in our region haven't been hiring for this job for a while? Do we know that students aren't enrolling in this? If we know all of that and we want to prioritize resources for certain programs that are resilient over others, then make the decision. But do not just use one source in order to make your decisions. So that's kind of my my disclaimer about how to use this report. All right. So now I want to share with you report, which is our 21st century employability skills. And it's basically a report on soft skills. And we hear a lot about incorporating soft skills into career technical education, but sometimes folks don't know which ones to prioritize. We know a list of soft skills, let's include all of them. Well, this report will hopefully help you refine which ones you want to use. So in the report, we looked at the top soft skills in online job postings, I think for a period of a couple of years for Imperial County. And we categorize all of the soft skills into 6 different categories: effective oral and written communication, agility and adaptability, accessing and analyzing information, collaboration across networks, initiative and entrepreneurialism, and then finally, critical thinking and problem solving. So these 6 categories were very similar to what we found in San Diego County as well. The interesting thing about this is that the top 10, so there are 25 skills you see here. It's 25 top skills in not just Imperial County, but all over the nation. And when you compare the top skills, you'll see that communication skills is the top ranking soft skill in the US. It's the same in Imperial County. And if you look in San Diego County numbers too, it's the same in San Diego County. And I want to emphasize this issue that employers have about finding people with proper communication skills. I've conducted labor market research since I've worked for the Workforce Board. It's been about 8 years. And over the past 8 years of doing this research, interviewing employers and surveying employers, they always tell me that they need people with communication skills. Why? One, because their customers are incredibly diverse and their teammates or workers are also incredibly diverse. When you look at companies like Netflix, they have offerings for a variety of audiences. They have options that people from various backgrounds will be interested in. If you only have one type of worker that will produce content for a variety of different types of customers, your company is not going to do very well. But if you have a diverse workforce, as diverse as your customers, then the products that you develop are going to take in consideration all these different perspectives and create really, really good services or products for your customer. And then you can grow your customer base. But because of diversity, communication is a huge issue and teamwork is a huge issue. People don't always know how to work with people from different generations, different cultures, different just backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds in general. So that's one thing that I think that we as a workforce and education system really need to focus on is those communication skills. And we spoke to employers about this pandemic. And the one thing that they did want to share, even though they don't want to tell us which jobs are growing, is that it's really hard to find people who can communicate in this remote environment as well, and to communicate with customers and show them that they care. So focus on communication, because it's not just a soft skill, but it's something that will help us be resilient in this pandemic and when we go back into the regular, whatever regular or normalness is going to be. So again, going back to the original scenario, if you've been asked to incorporate soft skills and you don't know which one, the report gives you the top 10, the top 25, and then top 10 out of the 25, and it gives you definitions. So if you want something to talk to your students about and give them something to review, there's a resource for you in that report. I think my time is running out, so I wanted to give you a link here to where our reports are at. I think the slides are going to be shared afterwards, but if you go to this link, and I'll type it in the chat in a minute, you can find all of the special reports that I shared with you, and you'll see some for specifically for Imperial County. Whenever we release a report, I send out an e-news. So hang tight. When that the resilient jobs report for Imperial County comes out, you'll be able to get that. All right, then I'm gonna stop sharing now. And I think I'm gonna let our hosts continue on to what we need to do next. So thank you everybody for listening to my talk about the labor market research we've done.
Thank you very much. So we'll come back to a couple of questions at the end, but before we move on, I'd like to remind you that we still have our industry specific breakout sessions, and they will be happening throughout the rest of the year up until January. So if you go to our regional CTEAC site, you will be able to go to the different breakout session opportunities we have. And as you can see here, it has the date. We'll be adding the link so that you could join us in the website. There's a lot of labor market information, resources, and we've even taken some links from the reports that Ms. Bartel has been sharing with us. So our next industry specific breakout session is next week, October 28th at 3:15 p.m. to 4:15 for health sciences. And I'd also like to remind you that we will be adding in the chat, well, they have already been added, our general session evaluation. If you could please provide us with some feedback for next year and for the upcoming industry breakout sessions, as well as fill out an industry survey to give us some data on industry trends and other information for discussion purposes in the breakout sessions, and so that we could share with our CTE teachers. And I think that's, well, don't forget to stay if you're interested in asking a couple more questions to our keynote speakers. Once again, thank you for staying with us throughout this presentation, and I'll reintroduce Mr. Edwin Overfeltz for the closing announcements.
Yes, I want to again thank all the presenters and all of everybody that joined us today. Thank you for taking the time to participate in this. We really appreciate that. I also want to thank the IVROP staff that helped to put this together. We are looking forward to what is going on here to answer the questions. And then if we don't get to your questions today, we will certainly be able to, we hope to get them to them, to answer them soon. We look forward to having all of you participate, if you can, in the up and coming industry sectors that Janet just pointed out. And again, thank you all. We went through volcanoes and we went through hurricanes, and we heard about resilience. And so I think we heard a lot of opportunities as well. So thank you all for that. And now I want to just go back to see if there's any opportunity to answer any questions. Adriana, a few questions?
Yes, I believe we have some requests for questions already. Dr. Andres, would you like to ask a question?
Sure, I actually have two, one for Mr. DeWitt and one for Mr. Silva. Thanks again, IVROP, for putting this all together. These really high quality presentations. I love all the access to the really current data and reports that were shared by our first and last presenter. Mr. DeWitt, we really appreciate the perspective from the national perspective from ACTE. We have a blossoming CTE movement here in the Valley. At the high school level, we've accessed great opportunities through the Strong Workforce Program here in California. Very interested if you or through ACTE or others associated would be able to provide or could talk to us about training opportunities for teachers, what that might look like, what ACTE does for training or guest speaker type work.
Sure. So we do provide what we call professional development, but it's not, we don't do any technical assistance coming into a school at this current time. Most of what we provide is through our membership. We do have a magazine that identifies best practices and programs, lifts those up. We do have the trainings that we provide through our concurrent sessions and our general sessions at our conferences. And I'd be happy to follow up with you on any of that. But, I'm not sure that we would be, we're not a trainer per se. So that's usually left to the state or the school districts that we work with. But happy to talk to you offline if that's helpful.
Well, that's very helpful. I mean, I think having done a little work beyond the state of California in this space, it's helpful to see another perspective. And I think we oftentimes here get caught in our own little cycles. So having a broader perspective, even if it's just general topics, can be very helpful. So we are going to reach out to you. Specifically watch for something from Ms. Cabanilla, who's on this call. We'll be tracking you down.
Will do. And let me also mention, we definitely have perspective. I mean, there's a lot of our resources that you'll find on our website, actonline.org, that are free. We keep debating about whether we should, require this for membership only, but even that COVID guide I mentioned, which is about 60 pages long, I believe is open to anyone. We want to support the field, so use those.
Thank you. My next question is for Mr. Silva. I think I've engaged a couple of times people around this one. Efrain, could you share with us the college's development of guided pathways? Where is IVC in guided pathways as it relates to either CTE in general or transfer? But I'm struggling to still find good next step information around guided pathways at IVC.
I don't know how much I can give you, Dr. Walters. I think that I will make sure that someone contacts you to make sure you get the information. I know we're in the development of the meta majors to be able to identify the entry level for our students and the classification of those. And I know CTE is an important component of that. But beyond that, I really could not give you more information, but I'll make sure somebody contacts you and provides you that information.
Thank you. The fast track, because as soon as you mentioned it, since we're on these Zoom calls, I'm searching stuff, right? And so it's nice to see those two fast track pathways readily available, and those are great. I think in some ways they can serve as a model in principle, not necessarily practice, but for the guided pathways as a way to broker and reach out to college students to quickly move them forward. So
yeah. So pre-COVID, when we started the welding fast track program, so we took a program that was taking 2 years to complete. We obviously have to keep the same instructional hours, but we did it in a way where, again, students were able to come in sequentially. They would take one course, take a break, and then take the other one. Or we took 16-week courses and compressed them into 8 weeks so that they can take 3 or 4 courses within the same semester. And with that, we're able to take a 2-year program into an 11-month program that also is tied to industry certifications. And I wasn't sure how successful that was going to be. And I will tell you that it was successful beyond my expectations. We had to stop enrollment at 40 students because we just did not have the physical capacity to take on more. We could have taken on more. And right after that, we began to get calls from students wanting to get on the wait list for the next fast track program. So it works. I have some interest from faculty. I think there's some challenges with that, but I'm working with that because I recognize the value and I recognize how important that is for those students that just want to come and learn a trade, go out to work. And as I showed in the slide from our employment outcome survey, you see the results. You see how the benefit to our students and be able to get those classes done.
I have a question. This is Juan Campos with IVROP. Actually, I'm going to rephrase it. It's more of a comment. I want to just thank all of our presenters, Tina, Stephen, and Bob. Gosh, thank you so much. I mean, the silver lining of COVID is just how we become more accessible. And a perfect example is I sat in a presentation that a few weeks ago, and Stephen put his cell number out there, and you just talk about accessibility. That's just fantastic. And I just thank all of our presenters. Some of our up and coming presenters were even in this session. We have at the California Community College's Chancellor's Office, a couple of regional directors for employer engagement who sat in this general session, and some of them are up and coming. So we thank them for being here and helping be a part of this greater vision to bring more expertise to our region. So thank you very much.
We do have another question from Mrs. Zamora for Mr. Efrain Silva. Would you like to ask the question yourself, Rocky?
Yes. Hi, Mr. Silva. How are you?
Wow.
Yes, it's me. Nice to see
my
you.
goodness. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. I love you, Mr. Silva. You're awesome. I love coming and seeing you every chance I get.
Awesome.
He was one of my teachers long time ago at IBC.
Yeah. She was one of my top students too. I'm so proud of you.
Oh, thank you. So one of my questions that I wanted to ask was, in your presentation, you had remarkable numbers in regards to who's working. And that's an issue that I'm coming across is after they graduate, how are you guys getting in contact with your students? Are you going through socials, calling them up, emailing them? Like, how are you keeping track after they leave?
So I will tell you that's a huge challenge, right? Mm-hmm. And as I indicated, we don't do it ourselves. The Santa Rosa Community College has a contract with the Chancellor's Office, and they do it, and that's all they do, and it's a big contract. So they have the resources, the personnel to be able to try to contact students through multiple mediums, whether that's an email, physical address, text messaging, social media. I know they have every way of doing it, but it requires that level of resources, that level of expertise to be able to get the numbers, and then they actually produce the numbers. So it's statistically based. So they look at a group of people, and then from there they make inferences about our whole group of graduates. So it's not a one-by-one count. It's based on statistical analysis. But we would not, there's no college that I know that would have the ability to do that individually, because the resources that are necessary for that is incredible. So I cannot take credit for that. I give credit to Santa Rosa College, because again, they've been doing it for a while. They're so successful that the Chancellor's Office decided to do a statewide contract with them. And so we gave them the data, we gave them the students' contact information and so on, and then they go out and find the students and complete those surveys.
Okay, got it. So basically just find them where we could find them.
Yeah, and I know Priscilla will say the same thing, that the challenge of doing the follow-up with WIOA clients is just as difficult as well.
Got it. Thank you so much.
So good to see you.
Likewise. Bye.
Thank you very much for that question and the response. Anybody else have any questions or speakers for our staff?
Looks like there's a question about presentations being available. We've recorded the call, and yes, we will collect the presentations and have that also available on that CTEAC website that Adriana shared earlier.
Good afternoon. This is Esperanza Colio again. I have a maybe more like a comment. I noticed that in the top soft skills is communication, which I don't disagree with that assessment. However, every day it's harder and harder to communicate with your service providers because now everything is atomized and a system. And I'm just giving you an idea. The other day I was calling Verizon and it took me like 2 days to get a hold of someone, a human being, to please answer some of the questions because my questions were not just a simple question, it was more a complicated question. And in the chat, they give you the opportunity to chat, but never to talk to somebody until I honestly said, I'm gonna cancel my service if I don't have a human being talking to me. So my question to the soft skills presenter is, how do you see this communication top skills, top skills, which I do believe is necessary? How are you gonna be able to transition the type of communications that an individual will have to have in the future to cope with the emerging new communication style? I don't know if I can put it together right, but that's, I don't know if I'm making any sense. Things are changing, and I think we had to accommodate ourselves for the upcoming changes, especially after COVID-19.
I appreciate that question. I'm going to tell you a little anecdote about how I think this is going to play out. This is based on, again, what I've spoken to employers about and what I've seen in the labor market based on the time that I've been doing this work. So we had a panel about 4 different industries, and we asked how some of these workers were shifting in this new remote world. And I didn't mention it in my presentation, but one of the recession resilient industries or sectors is health, obviously, and then life sciences. So when you look at during even the Great Recession, a lot of those jobs, yes, there were a lot of people getting laid off or fired, but overall employment was pretty stable. And so I asked, it was a doctor in the health industry, and I asked, how is COVID affecting you? What are some skills you need to change? And he said, you know, we're shifting towards telemedicine, and we've been doing it for a very long time now, but now it's been rapidly coming, it's much more rapidly in the timeline, is much more rapid than they originally thought. And so now in terms of their communication training at for health facilities is that they have to be not only in this remote environment to communicate, but they also have to be more, they have to have more gestures, because body language and communication is a very important thing to have, especially if you're trying to talk to a healthcare provider. If you're in pain and you see that the other person on the other screen is not there, that cares about you and shows that attentiveness to make sure that whatever needs you have are met, you're probably not going to go back to that provider. And so this doctor said, you know, my customer service skills have never been better, because now, I mean, it's kind of like a dance. Now I'm in front of the screen and I'm showing this patient how much I really care. And that she can see this, it's what we call the human factor that you can't automate. And so as a result of that, he has more clients than ever. And folks that can't shift to include this, for lack of a better term, better bedside manner, those companies are going to fail. And based on what you experienced here, I had I grew up as a child in a refugee home. My mom's Vietnamese. She doesn't speak English very well. She still doesn't. So she, because of COVID, the airline canceled her flight, and they were supposed to refund her money, and they didn't refund it. She called multiple times trying to communicate, try to ask, how can I get my money back? Do I have tickets? And so, of course, obviously, she'll never go back to that airline again. And so I think if these companies don't incorporate proper communication for a variety of cultures, a variety of languages, they're not going to survive. And it might take a while for that to show, but as consumers, you have a lot of power. If you're not going back to Verizon, you're not going back to that health clinic, they're going to go out of business. So that's how I see it playing out. They're going to have to communicate well, otherwise they're done.
Different ways of communication. Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions?
Hi, this is Juan again. I have a question for Stephen. Stephen, how many days do we have left to get the discount price of the Virtual Vision conference?
Oh, thank you for asking. I think it's October 28th, which is the deadline. So yeah, we'd love to have all of you register and participate. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's October 28th. I'm sorry, I'll look that up real quick and put it in the chat.
We have already some IVROP folks signed up, so
Awesome.
thank you for putting that on.
Thank you.
We have a comment from Mr. Alfredo Martinez. Would you like to tell us the comment? Would you prefer I read it for everybody?
Sure thing. I just wanted to emphasize the fact that what I heard from Tina is actually spot on. Most successful practices, especially those based in San Francisco, which is a heavily polluted area with doctors, dentists, and what's on and so more. And I just wanted to emphasize that it's very important, especially in communication. Most practices, that's their main focus. Learning how to communicate with their patients in regards to their treatment, discussing the risk and benefits of such treatments. And they even take classes from communication specialists that end up costing up to $1,000 sometimes. So I just wanted to point that out, that yes, communication is in fact the future, even though a lot of professionals, even in my field, will tend to disagree with me and say that things are still steadily becoming stale in the virtual sector, but that's not the case, especially not today with regards to the pandemic, right? That's it. That's the only comment I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to piggyback on that though, but that's exactly what's getting taught to our high schoolers in the CTE classes, that we integrate soft skills when we do our teaching. You know, that's part of our curriculum. That's one thing that IVROP has promoted with the 40 assets, you know, and us as teachers, as educators, we need to teach our students, you know, soft skills is a huge part of, you know, the labor industry, because it's not all about the technical skills, you know. So that's why it's so great that we have companies that are hiring our students, and then they're able to go to the work field and show you guys and show everyone like, hey, they're not just teaching us the industry, they're teaching us how to be kind, caring, you know, sociable human beings as well.
Absolutely. In fact, I was a CTE student, and I gotta give it up. I actually learned a lot of my communication skills through CTE. And even during my time in school with my patients, I was usually one of the doctors that got the most patients. And even now in my job, I still get most of my patients coming into me, not because I'm the best, but because I actually tend to talk to them more as a human being than a robot that diagnoses and treats.
That's amazing to hear. Thank you for sharing. With regards to IVROP, we do have career specialists, well, virtually stationed currently at the school sites. And what, like Ms. Zamora mentioned, one of our focus is to promote soft skills, because we have heard feedback from teachers and employer partners, and we know it is important. We have experienced it firsthand. So we do have workshops that we offer for transportable skills or soft skills. And I know Dr. Andres added a link to one of the reports he had previously shared with us. I believe that is also in our website. If not, we'll make sure to add it. It has very good information as well on transportable skills. We do have a comment from Dominic Molina. Would you like to ask your question, or would you like us to read it?
Hi, I could say it out loud. So I was wondering to Mr. Silva, in regards to the CTE courses offered at IVC, are there any partnerships between IVC and universities for students to apply to? So for example, is there a collaboration between IVC and a certain university in regards to the medical assistant program or the nursing program?
Mr. Silva might be away for a moment, so let's hold off on that question for 1 or 2 minutes and we'll come back to it. Dominic, thank you. By the way, are you a student?
Yes, I'm a senior at Southwest.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that because I recognize your name from some of the events we've had in the past. So we do have students in. So thank you for joining us. We'll come back to that question. I do want to give a moment to Ms. Bartel to comment a little bit on the transportable skills too.
Oh, I typed in the chat, but the word soft skills, I use that because I feel like it's a common phrase that everybody's familiar with. But through research and literature, they've been named a lot of things. Our report is actually called 21st Century Employability Skills. Again, for the sake of time and the fact that it's easier to say, I said soft skills, but it's also called baseline skills. That human factor, I said essential skills is what our workforce board in San Diego calls it. Emotional intelligence, EQ. Some folks call it foundational skills or even non-cognitive skills. So you'll see a lot of literature using these key terms.
I think as adults, as social distancing and all of that kind of eases up, I think we're gonna have to be retrained in soft skills and relating with each other. So we'll see how people ease back into that as things open up.
Thanks. And we have Mr. Bob Lanter. Would you like to share your comment?
Sure, I'm sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I was just referring to the report that Dr. Andrews mentioned from Burning Glass. Having been fortunate to spend some time at Burning Glass over the last couple of weeks, I think the skills are really important. Soft skills for sure are skills that transfer across all jobs and all occupations. But as you begin to build those skills and you start looking at other types of technical skills, whether it's customer service or loan processing or you name it, those skills can be built, and those ladders that you build with those skills are ways out of low wage jobs into higher level jobs. So how do you take a front desk person from a hotel at a front desk and move them into management, right? Or how do you use their skills at a front desk and move them into accounting jobs, which Tina said are resilient. So those are the ways to move people up out of poverty into middle skill jobs, to build those skills. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. Just checking if Mr. Silva is available. I think he had to step away for a moment to answer Dominic's question. If
No,
not,
I'm here.
Perfect, thank you. Would you like to repeat your question, Dominic?
Sure. Okay, so hello. I was just wondering if there are any partnerships between IVC and universities for students to apply to in regards to the CTE courses offered at IVC. So for example, are there any collaborations between IVC and a certain universities for students to apply to the medical assisting program or the nursing program you guys have at IVC?
Yeah, we have a wonderful relationship with San Diego State Calexico, where our students are able to complete their BSN, their Bachelor's of Science degree in nursing, just within a year of completing their associate degree here. They began to take courses at San Diego State while they're still here, completing their associate degree. And that relationship has been very, very fruitful. And many of our students take advantage of that and again, be able to complete their bachelor's degree and within 1 year, within 1 year of completing their associate degree is something that is very commendable and very beneficial to our students. I think that also in the call is Tanya Hodge from University of Arizona, who we also have a relationship with them and our ag students being able to transfer to University of Arizona with their Yuma campus and be able to complete their bachelor's degree in agriculture. Also is a partnership that we very much appreciate and has value for our students. We have other partnerships across other campuses. We have a partnership with CTEAC University for students to be able to complete their engineering program. That still has some work to be done. I think there's some challenges in terms of the articulation of courses with a Mexican university, but there's always opportunities in everything that we do, and we'll continue to look for those kind of opportunities.
Thank you. We do have a comment from Ms. Jackie Valadez. Would you like me to read it or would you like to share?
I'll go ahead and share. Thank you, Adriana. I just wanted to mention, in addition to the, quote, soft skills, we also as teachers and schools are addressing the social emotional learning competencies now more than ever. And this goes to what Juan was talking about and how we're going to return to school or to our work, and how are we going to support students and teachers and adults with the trauma that the pandemic has inflicted. And we are doing a really, I think, a good job in supporting students, teachers, and families in recognizing that social emotional learning is just as important as the academic content we're teaching right now. I do want to give a shout out to IVROP because they have been a leader and a support in this for all schools in our community. And they have created lessons, they have created a resource, a virtual calming room that many of our schools and students are using as a backdrop for the social emotional learning competency. So I just don't want to forget that the soft skills are important, communication skills are important, but let's not forget the social needs of our students and the mental wellness of us all.
Thank you for that. And thank you for the shout out. We appreciate it. And we're here to support all of you throughout this pandemic and any other time as we've done in the past. Ms. Tanya Hodges, would you like to share a little bit of what you wrote in the chat?
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much. We're workforce development university here in Yuma. We cater to the region, so we're a regional school, meaning that our students from Imperial Valley pay in-state tuition. So it's the same price whether you live in Arizona or you live in Yuma, and they're all workforce development degrees, meaning engineering, computer science, agriculture, also in family and consumer sciences and nutrition, dietetics. We just opened up a dietetics degree that will be partnering with the hospitals in both Yuma and Imperial Valley, as well as the schools and the retirement centers. So there's over 20 majors that students can complete, live at home in Imperial Valley, and our programs are all hybrid. So students don't have to live in Yuma. They can just come to Yuma maybe once or twice a week max, and the rest they can do online. Thank you for that time.
Thank you very much. So we'll have 5 more minutes or so. Any additional questions before we adjourn the meeting?
I want to share something if I can. We're talking about, I saw in the chat, the career ladder, and the stepping stones and all of that. And so I came across a book some time ago. It's called Answering Why, and it's a good book, and it plugs in this kind of career tree, and in it it's just something to kind of think about when it comes to entry-level careers, because that kind of came up, the transportable, what leads to what. So in the entry-level careers, which we have quite a bit of here in the Valley, they do lead to those technical careers. So we have a lot of, short order cooks and cashiers and things of that nature, but there is a pathway to those professional careers like management and that. So I just wanted to kind of share that, and open to have that kind of share that conversation a little bit more. But it's a really great book, and it goes into I'm gonna stop sharing here now, but it does go into some really great other thinking, holistic thinking, and how to engage students beyond just the CTE side, which Jackie talked about. Like, how do you kind of keep students focused as they're focusing on their academics and their career skills and that.
Thank you for sharing. Any last questions, comments? None? Okay. So again, thank you very much to our keynote speakers for joining us and supporting us in this new endeavor, this virtual Regional Advisory Committee meeting. Thank you for taking additional time out of your day to stay a few more minutes to respond to some of the questions from our guests. Thank you all for staying additional time. That's what happens with the virtual world. There's hiccups, and we appreciate you guys for being here. Don't forget to visit our website. We will be updating it with the minutes, the presentations, and additional information. It is important for us that you complete the industry survey, because that is the data that we will be sharing with teachers, and the session evaluation will help us to plan and carry out other events in the future. So any feedback that you can give us, we will take it and we will appreciate it. So I will once again open it up to Edwin for any last comments.
Just again want to thank you all for, excuse me, thank you all for your participation in this, and to help IVROP to be able to serve you in your needs. And again, I also want to finish off by the comment that was made earlier, Mr. DeWitt, don't forget to thank an educator. The education work is fantastic, and it always has been fantastic. And certainly now during this COVID-19 period, it certainly has been more of a challenge for everyone in this work, but it's because of your kind and caring and wanting to do better is what we are here to help you out with, and so we appreciate that. So thank you to all of our educational partners. Thank you again to all the presenters, Bob, Lanter. We look forward to working more with you. Mr. DeWitt, thank you also as well, and certainly to missing Tina, thank you, Tina. You're awesome. We really do appreciate all the work that you've done here in our community. And we want to collaborate with you additional. Priscilla, can't thank you enough for all the work that you continue to do. And Efrain, Silva, of course, all the awesome work that you're doing. So I hope I didn't miss anybody. And just finalizing, thanking all the staff for amazing organizing this stuff. And we look forward to continuing to seeing you again in these up and coming sessions. So thank you.